Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today is our last day in Job. Tomorrow our read will be out of Exodus. So we're going to finish up really strong in Job because we have had all this conversation and all this back and forth of who's right and who's wrong, who's righteous, and all of this. And today we finally get down to God's words, what God says and what God has to show Job in this situation. So let's hop into it. We're going to start in chapter 40 in verse 8. And God's going to ask Job, will you really annul my judgment? Job's been saying, man, if I can just present myself before God, I'll prove to him that I'm righteous and I'll prove to him that I'm right. And so when God comes back, and before that, God goes through all of this incredible detail of how He created. He created, the animals, and just it's really cool and incredible. And I would even encourage you to go online and look some of these descriptions up, and you can see some really cool stories about what God's talking about when He's describing things in here. And I would love to go into it with you, but we don't have that kind of time. So when God says, Job, will you really annul my judgments? It really made me think, do we as law enforcement officers and just as people in general, do we ever annul God's judgment? I think the answer is obviously yes, because every time I sin, I know God's judgment. Every time I think, well, just this one time, I can get away with this. A little white lie here is not going to hurt. Every time I consciously do that, I'm annulling God's judgment. I'm saying, I know better than you. I've got this under control. Or even if I say something dumb, like I used to say, well, I can do this and ask for forgiveness later because God will forgive me if I ask Him, right? Man, that's a terrible thing to do, terrible way to live. We cannot annul God's judgments. God is the God of justice. It is His justice. Okay? We can't circumvent it. We can't rebel against it. Justice is rock solid, and it always will be. Because it's part of who God is. It's part of His character. And anyway, we can go into that. But jumping down to chapter 42, verse 3, Job says, I have declared that which I did not understand. After God lays all this out for him, Job finally confesses and says, whoa, I had no idea. I am sorry. Please let me shut my mouth and listen to you. And then just a couple of verses down in verse 5, Job had no understanding. He had knowledge. If you read your Bible, and that's all you do, you read it and you don't put any of it into practice and you don't really think about it and you don't accept Christ, or but you read it from cover to cover and you know what it says. And there's a lot of people that have done that. They've got knowledge of the Bible, but they haven't had an encounter with God, and they don't truly understand God or understand His grace or His mercy or His compassion. There's knowledge of God and there's understanding of God. And here Job says, I had knowledge of you, but I did not have understanding until now, and now I understand you. Down in verse 10, God restores, the fortunes of Job. But it's interesting that it says God restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends. When was the last time you prayed for your friends? When was the last time you prayed for your supervisors, even the ones you don't like? Pray for these guys. Pray for your friends. This is such an incredible verse, and there's a lot to it that we probably don't understand. But God restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends. Job was blessed out of this prayer. Some incredible reads. Just this whole dynamic of God speaking to Job and restoring the fortunes of Job is really interesting and has a lot in there for us. Tomorrow, come back with Exodus chapters 1 through 4 read, and let's get into Exodus and see what God's going to show us in that book of His Word. So be blessed, be safe. I'll see you tomorrow.